on glam rock, despite being the furthest person from its context. ABBA, Queen, and Elton John, the sound of the 70s and 80s, filled my house from as early as I could remember, be it singing along with my mother in the kitchen or headbanging in the car on the way to school with my dad. My favorite of these was David Bowie. My prized possession was, and continues to be, a pair of Bowie Vans sneakers, and I wanted to draw an Aladdin Sane lightning bolt on anything I could for the longest. For an oddball kid trying to fit in, even decades later, he represented all that was cool and eclectic in a way that felt both daring and authentic. Even as a child, I sensed that Bowie's audacious style did more than entertain. It challenged norms in ways I would only continue to understand later. When Bowie debuted on the music scene in '72 under the character Ziggy Stardust, with flaming red hair, metallic bodysuits, and flamboyancy, the public didn't know what to do with such a flagrant display of androgyny. Was Ziggy an alien? Male? Female? Performance artist? All of the above? The societal and cultural shockwaves were immense, reshaping how performance and presentation are conceived even today. Bowie's glam rock work exemplifies the tension between creative freedom and the destabilization of social and moral norms. This essay will seek to encapsulate how the artist challenged traditional identity structures, especially the form of gender expression, while assessing the societal consequences of Bowie's body of work, particularly through the lens of gender, identity, and social norms. Glam rock was born in the bleak landscape of post-World War II Great Britain. In the early 1970s, economic recession, decline of industrial labor, and post-60s disillusionment, as well as shifts in class identity and ideas of national identity, laid the groundwork for glam rock's sparkles and feathers. Featuring glitter, velvet, and metallic fabrics, the style was a response to a dying world. It embodied what Frith and McRobbie would later call spectacular androgyny, confronting the masculine ideas of the preceding decades and the hypermasculine rebellion of American hard rock. From a conservative lens, glam rock demonstrates artistic creativity and innovation, propellants of social and cultural life. However, it simultaneously challenges social stability, traditional gender roles, and cultural norms, asking what of the past should linger as the turn of the century approached. Before Judith Butler gave us the language of gender as performative, a set of stylized repetitions that create the illusion of a stable identity, Bowie was already performing these ideas on stage. Gender, under Bowie's hands, was constructed, performed, and mutable. Bowie's personas and bodies were never singular. Ziggy Stardust was an alien messiah, who became Aladdin Sane as the fractured glam grotesque, then Halloween Jack, a dystopian trickster, the Thin White Duke, an aristocratic monster of alienation, all of which became the minimalist and mutable Bowie of the 80s and 90s. Each persona was a living argument in action. Gender and its presentation are inventions, one which can be creatively made. Bowie's refusal to remain fixed unsettled the conventional public because it exposed what theorists like Butler and Halberstam address, that normal gender is just manufactured as Ziggy's. He wasn't more artificial, even beneath all the makeup, rather simply more transparent about the artifice. This artistic performance was a philosophical challenge to tradition and moral clarity, asking the question, where does artistic freedom end and social consequences begin? Post-war masculinity was emblematized by emotional restraint, heterosexual clarity, labor-based purpose, and a grounded seriousness. Bowie's approach inverted this paradigm. It embraced theatricality, erotic ambiguity, and emotional expressiveness. Subversive, Bowie thus expanded the public imagination and loosened restrictive norms at the price of destabilizing traditional frameworks. By the late 20th century, roles of gender and family norms in Great Britain were dissolving. Kin-based family was replaced by increasingly fluid understandings of family, unmarried couples, multi-partner fertility, and looser ties. Women were entering the workforce in stronger droves, which meant a challenge to the traditional male identity of the breadwinner. And sociological work demarcates how from the 1960s onward, societal changes including rising individualism, changing gender roles, and sexual liberation contributed to higher rates of divorce, delayed marriage and childbearing, and increased non-marital collaboration and births. Glam rock was the musical accelerant to this disillusionment, symptomatic of broader changes. Bowie's constant reinvention raises deeper questions about authenticity, identity, and the true self. As Philip Auslander argues, Bowie's work deliberately rejects the idea of a stable, knowable core identity. Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and the Thin White Duke are masks that refuse to collapse into the real Bowie. This stands in sharp contrast to traditional rock's ideal of authenticity, an acoustic, unfiltered sound tied to emotional sincerity and a kind of working-class moral grit. Bowie flips this paradigm entirely, insisting that performance is not a betrayal of the self, but a legitimate mode of being. They're masks, but the masks don't reveal the real Bowie underneath, just more masks. Yet, from a more conservative standpoint, there is something unsettling in this idea that identity is nothing but costume changes. If the self becomes infinitely malleable, endlessly reassembled through performance, the stabilizing forces that bind communities, shared norms, common narratives, moral anchors, they all risk dissolving. Bowie's brilliance exposes the power of creative self-invention, but it also forces us to confront the cultural cost of treating the self as fully fluid and untethered. In the end, Bowie's legacy forces us to hold two truths at once. His work demonstrates the extraordinary power of creative imagination, the way aesthetic risks, theatricality, and bold self-invention can expand the boundaries of what a person can express or become. At the same time, the cultural disruption he unleashed reveals the tension that arises when long-standing norms are destabilized. Bowie's personas shine as symbols of artistic freedom, but they also function as cautionary figures, reminding us that identity experiments ripple outwards into the social world, shaping family life, moral expectations, and civic cohesion. Perhaps that is Bowie's final gift, an invitation to admire the beauty of creative possibility while recognizing the enduring importance of the structures that hold a community together.